The jury was multi-ethnic. 4 black people on the jury.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that Larry Elder never set foot in the courtroom in the Jonathan Majors case, which I did for like over a week. And I can assure you there wasn't a whole lot of diversity on the jury. There was one black woman, and they tried to throw her off the case. Of course, somehow or another, these people sitting in Manhattan in some sort of studio at News Nation, somehow they don't know anything about that. This video is going to focus on answering the question of why people hate the media, why the media is at the bottom of all the opinion polls, why it is that people are focused on finding other forms of information out there. And it's also going to go into implicit bias and the double standard that you sometimes see in American media. Dan Abrams at News Nation did a story on actor Jonathan Majors last night, which once again proves my point. Whose side of the story? Which story is told, how it's told, and when it's told. Of course, it's the whole ballgame. Let's just start with the chyron, shall we? Look at this. Actor Jonathan Majors plays race card, ... Again? When did he play the race card the first time? But think about that chyron as we go through the chyrons for actor Kevin Spacey. Remember, this is all on the same network, with the same people putting these pieces together in all likelihood, and the treatment is completely different. Also remember that Majors' case involves one person in court. Kevin Spacey's case, which he was acquitted, involved 12.
Actor Kevin Spacey, his sexual assault trial, he is facing 12 charges in the UK now.
Now imagine what News Nation and the New York Times would be doing if it was the reverse. It's no minor point that Kevin Spacey has been acquitted in all 12 cases. That's clearly the reason why you have all of this narrative of why isn't he working? He should be getting back to work. All these people are supporting him. All I'm saying is look at the narrative toward Jonathan Majors. And remember, his case is a misdemeanor case involving one person that was taped on video. We can see what's going on. It's a fracas. She's chasing him. And still he gets zero sympathy. And I'll always say it, obviously every case is different, but these two men at this moment are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to rebuild their careers after taking a hit in the court system. Okay, so they're both trying to do the same thing. So why is the media coverage completely different? And notice the fine print on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. He plays the race card again. Notice the title of the video. Jonathan Majors is doing damage control with a word speech. And then with Spacey, it's all about the comeback. Can he make a comeback? Now, what's so funny about this is, as we talk right now, you can see that Majors is making a comeback. I actually think Spacey is making a comeback as well. You can see Majors is starting to get roles, right? So there's a comeback happening. So why aren't they talking about Jonathan Majors' comeback? So when Jonathan Majors does it, it's damage control. When Kevin Spacey does it, it's, he's getting his story out and he's mounting a comeback. I mean, this is two totally different treatments of the same type of story. And if it's not a racial double standard, well, tell me what it is. They're both actors. They're both brilliant actors, both gifted actors. They're both involved in what can loosely be defined as a Me Too related thing that went to court. And in Spacey's situation, there was a series of people. There were a lot more people involved in his situation. Although, again, he was found not guilty. And I'm not trying to sweep that under the rug. He was found not guilty. But in Majors' case, there's one person. And then you had the New York Times trying to get all these other people involved because everybody knew. I mean, Alvin Bragg's office, these people are not fooling anybody. They knew the case was weak. That's why they're trying to get all these people, the ex-girlfriends, and let's get a story in the New York Times because the case that they had, that they brought to court, was weak. And they knew it. That's why you need all this stuff. But when we talk about who testified in court with their hand on that Bible, it was one person. That's it. In the Majors case, it's one person. And all this other stuff is hearsay.
To black people all too often.
So he's saying the reason he was prosecuted and convicted is because he's black. Let's get some facts straight. He was prosecuted by DA Alvin Bragg's office. Okay?
So that right there lets you know what Dan Abrams is really pissed off about. He's pissed off that Jonathan Majors, in accepting the Perseverance Award, brought up race. Oh my God, how dare he bring up race, right? How dare he do that? I'll get to that in a minute. Let's look at the staff of Alvin Bragg for a second. Of course, the assumption here that Abrams is making is that because Bragg is a black person, then that can't possibly mean that the Majors case was prosecuted or over-prosecuted. It couldn't have been over-prosecuted because the DA is black, right? So there's no way. I mean, hasn't he ever heard of Clarence Thomas? Ridiculous, right? That right there is ridiculous. But the case was over-prosecuted. Again, a misdemeanor case. But you see what motivates certain people? He did an entire 5-minute piece on this because he was pissed off that Jonathan Majors dared to bring up the history of this country. And gee, I wonder why Jonathan Majors would bring that up. I wonder why he would bring up the history of the way black men are treated in the American justice system.
Words of a wrongly convicted man determined to move on with his life. Maurice Hastings spent nearly 40 years in prison for a murder he did not commit.
Couldn't give up. Had to keep fighting.
His mother, very emotional.
21 years. Detective Scarcella lied on the witness stand about the sole eyewitness identifying Javar Washington. That eyewitness never identified Javar Washington.
Two North Carolina men spent 30 years in prison and murder, but they didn't do it. Both are expected to be released today after their convictions were overturned. The courtroom erupted in cheers Tuesday when a judge declared Henry McCollum and Leon Brown innocent.
It's a man who spent more than 40 years in prison for 3 murders he did not commit is now free. A Missouri judge ruled that Kevin Strickland, now 62 years old, was wrongfully convicted.
After 40 years, I'm finally going to get closure to this and clear my name.
In 1975, the Vietnam veteran was charged with tying up 2...
John Bunn has been waiting for this moment since 1991.
At this time, the people do move to dismiss the indictment.
Exonerated for murder.
And then one might think, well, those cases don't have anything to do with Jonathan Majors. Until you know the history of Bragg's specific office when it comes to Kevin Porter and Adam Foss, which, of course, Dan Abrams and News Nation probably don't know anything about. And frankly, I think if they did know about it, they probably wouldn't report on it. Because Majors is not going to get the nuanced treatment that Kevin Spacey is getting. My argument would be both should get it, not just one.
We live in a world where men, black men in particular, are propped up as either superheroes or supervillains. But I've come to realize, me personally, I ain't none of that. But I'm just me.
Notice that the Major speech at the awards ceremony was 17 minutes. He mentions race twice. And of course, News Nation only talks about that part of the speech. Only those 2 things about race. That's what Dan Abrams is obsessed about. Everything else is completely invisible.
So why not acknowledge at least some wrongdoing in what the organization giving him the award described as his journey of growth and redemption?
Let's just run a few reels here on things that I guess Dan just didn't see. I don't know.
I'm imperfect. I have shortcomings. I acknowledge them. I love my craft.
You feel that you did anything wrong on the night of March 25th? If you could relive that night?
I wouldn't have picked her up. I wouldn't have picked her up. I wouldn't have put her back in the car. I wouldn't have tried to keep her in the car. I would have gotten out that car and ran immediately.
Also with this why not show some remorse thing from Dan Abrams, of course, to some people, somebody black can never be sufficiently remorseful. So you always have to remember the backstory here of the last, 350 years. But think about it for a second. If you're Jonathan Majors and you found your girlfriend on the floor of your bathroom, unconscious and half naked, after you told her to leave the keys and goodbye, and you called the cops, and the cops show up and arrest you in your home and then charge you, and then it blows up your entire career into this whole thing, this misdemeanor case, and it has to go to trial, and it can never be dropped, and it doesn't matter that she's chasing him down the street, doesn't matter that she was charged with assault against him. Of course, Abrams doesn't mention any of that. And you'll also notice that Abrams never mentions the word misdemeanor. It does appear on the screen. It never comes out of his mouth. Of course not, because everybody understands. The word misdemeanor is code for this is BS. This is minor nonsense. But if you're John Majors, why are you being remorseful for getting arrested in your home because your girlfriend is out drunk or whatever she was doing, and then shows up and it's all this big mess, and then of course the cops show up and decide that he's the bad guy, which is exactly what happened. So all that stuff about, oh, he's not remorseful. Remorseful for what? What should he be remorseful for? So I am over Dan Abrams. He's pulled this nonsense before. News Nation is trying to look serious, like a serious broadcast. That's why they hired Chris Cuomo. All I'm saying here is that the media, there's no way that if you switch the details of these stories, and Majors was accused of 12 different things in court, and it wouldn't matter to anybody whether he was found not guilty or not. You'd get a bunch of people on Twitter saying, well, just because he was found not guilty, that doesn't mean he's innocent. You'd get that if it was John Majors accused by 12 different people. But all of this effort that is going into one story and not the other makes absolutely no sense.
In this case, what do you make of his demeanor?
Well, his demeanor is very good.
Does that mean he will, he can, he should now work in Hollywood?
So that was a massive, massive double standard on that one. Unbelievable. I'll be back soon.